As of late, you and I have been very busy with the folks at Volkswagen. First, it was a fully electric SUV. Then, it was the car that we have a very soft spot in our heart for, the GTI. However, now we have to check back in with the Volkswagen that pays the bills. So what exactly do I mean when I say pay the bills, and what are we looking at today? Well, the answer to both is the car that Volkswagen sells in the most volume in North America, which would be the Volkswagen Tiguan. And what we're looking at today is a heavily updated version. It's not a totally new version. It's basically a facelift. So let's start with the stuff that hasn't changed, most importantly, that EA 888 2-liter 4-cylinder turbocharged gas-directed engine. Now remember, in a Tiguan it's different than in a Golf or a Golf GTI in that it has different modes to increase the efficiency. That translates to more than respectable fuel economy, 23, 29, 25 combined. In terms of its mission as a people and more importantly, a hauler of practical crap, well, towing, I don't think most people would look at this to tow a horse trailer, but it's a bit below average in terms of 1,500 pounds towing. Then there is the actual output. Again, a GTI it ain't, and so the output in terms of horsepower, 184, in terms of torque, somewhat respectable at 221 pound-feet. Now, another thing that works in conjunction with the flash combustion system to improve the overall efficiency of the Tiguan would be the transmission. No, it's not the same 7-speed dual clutch we drove last week in the 2022 GTI. Rather, it's an 8-speed automatic, and that's paired either with a front-wheel drive system or an all-wheel drive system. Now that brings us to another rather important item that hasn't changed and frankly didn't need to change, and that would be the dimensions. This is something that's akin to like a Nissan Rogue or a Toyota RAV4. However, unlike those, the wheelbase here, where you package a lot of people and a lot of dogs, the mission of these vehicles is about 3 to 4 inches longer than those vehicles, even though the overall length is about the same. That also doesn't change the rear cargo capacity. It's about 37 cubic feet with the seats down, about 75 cubic feet. Okay, now that we got the bits out of the way that are the same, what the hell are the differences? Well, it's mainly cosmetic, and the biggest one by far would be the interior, at least to me. It's significantly more fancy. Now granted, the one we're looking at is like the super top flash trim, the SEL R-Line. So it has a different leather interior, and what they've done here is change some of the color and trim. This is something I would see in more of the higher end Volkswagen brands. It looks like something that came from a Bentley in terms of this color. This one is called Noisette or Noisette. It's a very strange name. And then to make the interior stand out, even in a Volkswagen Tiguan, now it has contrast stitching throughout the interior, which really goes a long way to make it more of a pleasant place to be. Then they've added some more trim to the door panels that change the overall look of the interior, as well as the texture, the tactile feel of the inside. Now, while you and I are on the topic of interacting with the vehicle, some good news. In my very limited time with this pre-production prototype that's so early it's held together by chewing gum and spit, I did notice it does not have that maddening UX system that we experienced in the ID4 as well as the 2022 GTI. Rather, it's the older Volkswagen system that still has some real buttons. My suggestion is get away from what's in the ID4 and the new GTI, and let's do more rotary controllers, toggle switches, and real buttons. This is the direction we should be going, not just because of my design preferences, but because of safety. Now, for those of you that are totally bought off into these types of systems and are about to pounce on the screen saying, well, what about voice control? Yes, voice control is lovely when it works. Don't believe me? Pull out your Android device or pull out your iPhone. Try talking to that. See if it can get complex things when you're trying to dodge traffic and get around potentially hazardous situations. That's why we're not there yet. Anyway, let's press on to the other stuff that's changed, and there are some exterior bits here. And again, this one being the SEL R-Line, it's got a lot of changes here. So this has got the very fancy 20-inch wheels, but for the avoidance of doubt, these can be fitted standard with 17s all the way up to the 20s you see here. And another very important item that hasn't changed, the setup underneath the vehicle is still McPherson struts in the front and a multi-link in the rear. Back to the outside of the vehicle, you will notice the bumpers in the front and rear has changed. And then something that Klaus and his team in Wolfsburg in design have decided to change here is add more pageantry with the lights. Now you look at this one here, it's got this light bar going across the front of the vehicle. I must admit it is an unusually nice touch and makes the overall conservative design of a Tiguan that hasn't changed stand out. However, something that's far more important in terms of lighting is a change in the headlights. Now this is not fitted as standard to these vehicles, just the fancy ones, and that is adaptive LED lights, which this car has that we are looking at today. So if you're keeping track thus far, the biggest change on the outside of the vehicle would be the front end, specifically the lighting as well as the overall treatment underneath the vehicle. One other thing that I forgot to mention. Remember the color of the GTI we drove last week, that stunning King's Red? That is now on offer in the Tiguan. Frankly, I don't know why they didn't show us this car in that color. Something tells me it would stand out, especially with that nut brown noisette interior, whatever they're calling it. Which brings us to what we have here. This is still a very competitive vehicle. This is something that Volkswagen has done very well with. It doesn't sell in quite the same numbers of like a RAV4 or a Nissan Rogue. Give you an idea, they sell like 250,000 a year. Each of those, Volkswagen has sold a total of 350,000, I believe, since 2018. And that brings us to one of the challenges of this vehicle. Its competition is really not a RAV4 or a Rogue. Rather, it's sitting in the same showroom and it's called the ID4. They can't build enough of those things, and I think that's going to be the case for a very long time because it's a competitive vehicle, and frankly, the pricing is very close to this, and it's an electric vehicle, which yes, has its advantages and disadvantages, but for the kind of folks who are looking at something that's not the usual Toyota, Honda, Nissan, or Ford, I could see them saying, yeah, I could consider an ID4. That's one challenge with this vehicle, which brings us to the wish list. And here is something that I would love to see to make this more competitive and would be a better alternative to something like an ID4, and that is to take the mild hybrid systems, the 48-volt systems we see in the very fancy version of Volkswagen cars like the Bentley or like the Porsches, and do it here, but on a much more affordable scale. And the concept would be to drastically increase the fuel economy as well as perhaps change the overall architecture of the vehicle. Now follow my overall logic here for a minute. By having less moving parts in the vehicle, working in conjunction with an integrated starter generator motor, yes, it would improve the overall efficiency of the vehicle because it would have some electric assist. But most importantly, especially for a German vehicle that is supposed to be affordable, by having those less moving parts, I would hope it would improve the overall reliability. And last, but certainly not least, this would be a more efficient solution that would work in today's infrastructure, or the infrastructure of the medium term, meaning it would appeal to folks that want to save a couple of shekels, not early adopters. And this is the point of the episode where I turn it around to you guys to opine in the comments below, or via our social media, MotoManTV, all in word, MotoManTV, all in word, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And with that, I do want to say that today we've been very practical. We've been very good. So the next Volkswagen outing really should be something that's also 2022, but I'm thinking more Golf R. Until I see you in the next episode, bis später.